Hello, I am Dr. Rajshri Chatterjee, Associate Professor, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Jagannath University, Jaipur.
Hello everyone. Our today's topic is pressures on journalists. In this topic, we consider the ways in which journalists are tempted to go against their ethical standard. We also consider ways to resist temptations. Journalists are professional people trying to work within the code of professional ethics. As we saw in the last chapter, this includes the need to be fair to all parties involved in any news story. However, journalists cannot operate in vacuum, doing what they think is right, without pressures being put on them. Journalists face pressure from a variety of sources, all trying to make the journalist behave in a way which is not the way the journalist would choose. In this topic, we are going to discuss various pressures that a professional journalist might face, and we will also be discussing few solutions that how to overcome those pressures. And moreover, we will be discussing that what are the ethical ways a journalist should behave in a democratic society. Let's start with the same. It is important that you try to resist all these forms of pressure as far as possible. Of course, you will sometimes fail. This is an imperfect world, and journalists are also imperfect. Nevertheless, you should always try to resist the kinds of pressure which we shall discuss in the chapter. As you can see on the screen, there is a cartoon. In this cartoon, what it depicts that a person is sitting on the chair, and around him, all the other people are creating some kind of pressure. And as you can see, there are so many things that are around, so many people that are around him, like government, police, advertising, employer, people who are trying to bribe, family person, some pressure groups, or the employer as well. Now here in this cartoon, it is trying to depict that what are the types of pressure that can be created on a journalist. So we are going to discuss each pressure individually. The very first pressure is employer. Your employer pays your salary. In return, they expect you to say how you will do your job. This can lead to ethical problems for journalists. If you work for a government owned organization, then your government will be your employer. This could make it very difficult for you to report critically on things which the government is doing. Ministers will often put pressure on public service journalists to report things which are favorable to the government, even when they are not newsworthy, and not to report things which are unfavorable to the government. They can enforce public service discipline to make journalists do as the government wants. This is especially difficult to resist in small developing countries where there may be little or no alternative employment. It is not only government-owned media where such pressure exists, though. Commercial media are paid for a mixture of advertisement and sale. To increase sales in newspapers, radio and television stations sometimes sponsor sporting or cultural events, and they then publish them. Your boss may demand more coverage for the event than it is worth. In order to promote the event as much as possible, you will need to persuade them of the danger of this. The other events will have to be neglected to give extra coverage to your sponsored event, and this will risk losing readers or listeners. Advertisers can also bring pressure to bear upon owners and editors. A big advertiser may threaten to stop advertising unless you run a news report of something good which the advertiser has just done, or much worse, it may threaten stop advertising unless you ignore a news event which is unfavorable to the advertiser. Ideally, any news organization should dismiss such threats and judge each story only on its news merits. However, this is easier in larger community with a diverse and developed economy than it is in a small country with developing economy. When a commercial news organization is operating in tiny profit margin, it will not easy to turn away big advertiser, and its owners may feel forced to give the pressure. In some cases, the advertiser may even the government. In many countries, the government is the biggest advertiser, with job advertisement, call for tenders, public announcement, and so on. And this can be a way in which governments bring indirect pressure to bear upon commercial news media. Why why should you do what should you do about this kind of pressure? The first thing which any journalist should do is to report to the editor. It will be the editor to decide what to do. He or she need to resist the employer as far as possible, pointing out the dangers of the failing to report the news unfairly. The main danger is that readers or listeners who already know of the event which is being suppressed realize that it is not being reported, so lose confidence in the newspaper, radio, and television station involved. This may be in the long run may result in more serious problems for ministers than some short-term embarrassment, and may do more long-term damage to your organization finances than the loss of one advertiser. The truth is, though the power to resist pressure for your employer is limited, you can only do your best and accept that the rest is beyond your control. The second point is authority. Second kind of pressure is authority. Both government owned and commercial news media may face pressure from authority. The government, the police, the customs, or some other branch of the authority. Government can threaten or make laws to force all news media to be licensed. This would give them power to grant licenses only to those news organizations which please the government. Even the threat to introduce such legislation may be enough to frighten journalists and to make them afraid of criticizing the government too much. The best way to resist such pressure is to stimulate public debate on the issue of media licensing. As with the proposed legislation, the news media should encourage public debate before it comes, so that the leader have the opportunity to judge public opinion. And so, if society generally is opposed of licensing of all the media, then a democratically elected government will think very seriously before introducing such a thing. On the other hand, if society wants news media to be licensed by government, then it is something which journalists will have to accept, however much they may disagree with it. Other forms of authority may bring pressure to bear on you is less official way. Police may attempt to confiscate your camera when you are taking photographs with the police do not like. They may deny you access to a courtroom or public meeting, or they may order you not to report certain things. Junior journalists should always report such incidents to the editor. The editor will best resist the kind of pressure by knowing precisely what he is allowed to do and what he is not allowed to do. If he knows the police are acting outside their powers, he can politely approach a very senior police officer or even the police minister and report the incident. They can handle it. If the police act outside their powers and no action is taken, even though it has been reported, then the editor can publicize the fact in a major news story. It is wise, though, to try to sort out such problems quietly first, since in this way the future relations may be very positive. Threats. Many people think that they can avoid bad publicity by threatening journalists with violence or legal actions. Such threats should always be resisted, unless you are advised by a lawyer that you are legally in the wrong. Junior journalists should always report any threat which they have received to the editor. If the threat was a threat of violence, then the editor should seriously consider informing the police. It is usually a criminal offense to threaten violence against somebody, and journalists are protected by such a law as much as anybody else. If the threat is legal action, then the editor's response will depend on the facts of the case. The editor should know the law well enough to judge whether or not to take the threat seriously. If he suspects that there may be grounds of legal action, he should consult a lawyer. Then, if he finds that the reporter is in the wrong, or of course he should immediately set things right. If however he finds that there is no basis for legal action, then he and his reporter can happily ignore the empty threat. Bribes. Journalists do not usually earn big money. You may therefore be vulnerable to bribery. Somebody offering money or goods or services in return of a favorable story being written or an unfavorable story being ignored. To accept a bribe is dishonest. Your honesty is like virginity. It can only be lost once. Once you have accepted a bribe, you can never again be trusted by a professional person. Journalists who are offered bribes will usually be offered them in private. This is so that the person attempting the bribe can later deny that it ever happened. If this happens, you should immediately invite somebody else into the room. and then ask the briber to repeat their offer. They are likely to do so, but if they do, you will have a witness. In any case, report the matter to the editor. Gifts and freebies. Commercial companies sometimes try to buy journalists' friendship by giving them small presents or by giving them opportunity to travel at the company's expense. Often this travel is legitimate. An airline which is introducing a new route to and from the country, you may well offer a free seat on the first flight. You will then have the opportunity to write from first hand experience about the service and about the destination. If the airplane is confident that it is the service is good and the destination is interesting, then they will be satisfied that whatever you write will be good publicity for them, as long as it is understood that you are free to write whatever you like without the company that provides the free travel having any influence. Such an agreement is acceptable. However, if you are offered a ticket in return for writing something nice about the company, then it is not acceptable. Poor newspapers, radios, and television stations may be grateful for the charity to top up inadequate travel budgets, but they should never be so poor that they sell their professional honor. In a case, the former editor of Hindustan Times, Kushwant Singh, once said that he would accept a bottle of whiskey from anybody because he would still feel free to criticize them. But he would not accept a case of 12 bottles of whiskey because he was afraid that might influence the way he did his job. In any case, all the gifts, however small, should be declared to the editor. If the editor considers that the gift is too large and too generous to be accepted, you will have to return it politely but firmly. People need to know that you and your news organization have moral and ethical standards and sorry and are prepared to them. Sometimes executives in companies and government departments will devote a lot of time and energy to making you in their friend. They may take you out for meals, but buy you drinks and invite you to their home. Beware of this. If it is genuine friendship, there may be no problem, but if it may be an attempt to win your loyalty. It is as bad to run a story which is just a free advertisement or to suppress bad news as a favor to a friend as it is to do the same thing in return of a bribe. Family. In many societies, a person's first loyalty is to the members, extended family, a clan or tribe. This is expected to take priority over all the loyalties, including their loyalty to the ethical standards of the profession. Thus, a doctor who saved the life of a traditional enemy could meet the disapproval of his own relatives. The hardest job is that the editor himself. He cannot avoid the clash of responsibility in this way and must take the decision either to please his family and sacrifice his organization's credibility or to maintain professional standards and cut himself off from his family. Neither decision will be easy, but it is to be hoped that senior journalists in such situation will be able to set an example of professional and ethical courage to their colleagues. Next is tradition. In societies where there is change of tradition to modern ways, there is often a clash between the way in which the things we are done in the past and the way we are and the profession says we should be done now. For example, freedom of speech may itself be a recent imported concept. Traditionally, it may be that one man of a certain rank has the right to express their views, or the certain clans have the right to express their views on certain subjects, and it may be the case that very few people have the right to question a chief. All this is a very different of a Western lifestyle and press in which everybody is encouraged to speak on every subject, and journalists, however, junior are encouraged to cross-examine leaders, however, senior. Tradition will often be used as a weapon to pressure journalists into patterns of behavior which go against their professional ethics. Journalists should always respect, report such instances to the editor and seek guidance. The way forward will require careful thought. The professional ethics of journalists in our country may still be developing. They will be influenced by professional journalist ethics in other countries where journalist is more established, but they will also be influenced by the traditions of the society out of the clash of cultures. A new culture may develop suitable for your mood in the modern world. Personal conviction. Journalists may come under pressure from their own strong beliefs. For example, a journalist who is deeply opposed to capital punishment may be writing a story about crime. In the course of gathering the information, they may interview somebody who calls for the death penalty as the answer to increasing crime. The journalist may be tempted not to report these comments and to leave the questions of capital punishment out of the story. This would clearly be unethical. It is as bad to censor the news to suit your own views as to censor the news to please your family or clan or tribe. This is contrary to the most fundamental principle of free speech, and that we may disagree with that somebody says, but that we must fight to defend their right to say it. Lastly, code of ethics. In many countries, journalists try to work within the professional code of ethics. This usually lay down in simple, straightforward terms the kind of things they should and should not do. Typically, such codes contain rules about issues such as honesty, fairness, independence, and respect for the rights of the other people, such as interviewees, victims, and readers or listeners. In most free press democracies, journalist code of ethics are usually voluntarily, perhaps monitored by a professional association or journalist union. In such case, the only real sanctions against journalists who breach the codes are criticism from colleagues and perhaps loss of membership or the association or union. In some some cases, media employers might use the journalist code of ethics to set standard for journalists they employ, in which case breaches to the codes which lead to discipline or even sacking. In some countries where the media are suppressed, the government may try to control what is written and broadcast by imposing a code of ethics backed by law and policed by the authorities. These are like any other laws in the countries. Breaking them may lead to punishment, so it is up to the journalists themselves to decide whether to obey oppressive codes or follow the higher principles of journalistic ethics and risk the consequences. Thank you.